Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside, or I'll have to call security. The bank manager's voice sliced through the hushed atmosphere, loud enough for nearby customers to turn and stare. Imari Washington felt her heartbeat quicken, not from fear, but from a slow-burning rage she had mastered containing years ago. The same rage that had fueled her rise from nothing to everything. The same rage she had transformed into quiet power. She clutched her designer purse tighter, the envelope inside containing documents that could change everything in an instant. "I'm not moving until I access my money," she replied, her voice dangerously calm. The security guard was already approaching, hand resting casually on his holster. Around her, whispers began. Judgments formed. Another black person causing trouble at a bank. If only they knew whose name was on the deed to this building. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of First Capital Bank, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor as Clayton Whitfield, the branch manager with thinning blonde hair and a perpetual frown, slid her ID back across the counter for the third time. "As I've explained, Mr. Whitfield, I need to withdraw $200,000 for a company matter. My identification and account information are right there in front of you." Her voice remained steady, though a slight crease had formed between her brows. Clayton Whitfield, the branch manager, a man with thinning blonde hair and a perpetual frown, glanced at her ID again with obvious skepticism. His eyes darted from the card to Imari's face as if trying to spot a forgery in her very existence. Mrs. Washington, withdrawals of this size require extensive verification. Bank policy." He emphasized the last two words with a patronizing tone that hung in the air between them. "Do you really have that much in your account? Perhaps a cashier's check would be more appropriate." Around them, the bank hummed with the quiet activity of other customers being served efficiently. An older white gentleman at the next counter was processing a wire transfer with nothing more than a driver's license. He caught Imari's eye for a moment, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable at witnessing the unfolding scene. Imari inhaled slowly, her manicured fingers tapping once on the counter. In her mind, a silent count to 10. Not because she was losing control. Imari Washington never lost control, but because she was making a decision about how this situation would end. "I have more than sufficient funds," she replied, her voice dropping to a quieter register that somehow commanded more attention than if she had shouted. "And I've been banking here for 15 years. Now, will you process my withdrawal, or do I need to speak with someone else?" The security guard shifted his position, angling slightly toward their exchange. Imari noticed the movement from the corner of her eye, another indignity, subtle but unmistakable. The message was clear. She was the one being watched. "We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below with your city or country, and don't forget to subscribe to join our community sharing these important stories." 6 hours earlier, the day had begun like many others in the Washington household. Imari moved through her morning routine with practiced precision, a 5 a.m. workout in her home gym, a brief meditation, and then the careful selection of today's armor, the burgundy power suit that had become something of a lucky charm. "Big day?" Khalil asked, watching his wife apply a final touch of lipstick. After 17 years of marriage, he could read the subtle tells in her preparations. "Potentially life-changing," Imari replied with a small smile, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "For 27 people, at least." Khalil placed his hands on her shoulders, a gesture of support that had carried them through countless moments, both triumphant and trying. "They have no idea how lucky they are to have you in their corner." Imari covered his hand with hers, allowing herself this brief moment of softness before stepping back into the role of CEO, founder, and perpetual fighter against lowered expectations. Downstairs, their 16-year-old daughter Amara sat at the kitchen island, textbooks spread out beside her breakfast. "Mom, did you see my academic decathlon team made nationals?" Amara's eyes, so like her mother's, sparkled with pride. "I did. Your principal called yesterday. Apparently having a Washington competing has generated quite a buzz." Imari poured herself a cup of coffee, black with a single teaspoon of honey, the same way she'd taken it since her college days when she'd studied until dawn, determined to graduate at the top of her class. Only because of you, Amara said with an eye roll, though the pride in her voice was evident. Perks and burdens of being the daughter of the Imari Washington. No, Imari said firmly, tipping her daughter's chin up. They're excited because of you. Amara Washington, brilliant in her own right. Never let anyone's perception diminish what you've earned through your own merit. It was a lesson Imari had learned through bitter experience, one she was determined her daughter would inherit without having to suffer for it. The weight of being a black woman in spaces not designed for her was heavy enough without carrying the additional burden of imposter syndrome. Thanks, Mom. Amara's smile was genuine now. Knock him dead today. Imari kissed her daughter's forehead. Always do. The drive to Horizon Innovations headquarters gave Imari her daily 15 minutes of solitude to prepare mentally for the role she would play for the next 12 hours. The company she had built from nothing now employed over 200 people and had revolutionized financial technology access for underserved communities. Their latest contract, a partnership with a major international bank to implement Horizon's proprietary security software, was the culmination of 5 years of relentless work and innovation. But today wasn't about the contract. Today was about the people who had made it possible. Desiree Okafor, Horizon's CFO and Imari's right hand for the past decade, waited in the lobby. At 45, Desiree had the sharp mind of a financial virtuoso and the warmth of a born mentor, a combination that made her invaluable both in boardrooms and in nurturing young talent. Everything's prepared, Desiree said, falling into step beside Imari as they walked toward the executive elevator. The board approved the bonus structure unanimously, called it remarkably generous. Generous? Imari raised an eyebrow. It's their due. 27 people who believed in this company when we couldn't even afford decent office furniture, who worked nights and weekends to meet impossible deadlines, who stood by us when that venture capital firm tried to force me out as CEO. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in momentary privacy. You remember what happened at Tech Summit last year? Imari asked suddenly. Desiree's expression darkened slightly. When that investor asked if you were part of the diversity outreach team, and then spent 20 minutes explaining blockchain to me. Imari's laugh held no humor. After I'd just given the keynote on emerging financial technologies. Hard to forget, Desiree said. Though I'm still impressed you didn't eviscerate him on the spot. I almost did, Imari admitted. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to say. When people tell you who they are, believe them the first time, but you don't have to give them a second audience. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, where the wall of windows offered a panoramic view of the city that had once seemed so impenetrable to a girl from South Side Chicago with nothing but determination and a scholarship to her name. That's why today matters, Imari continued as they walked toward her office. Every person on our core team has faced someone who underestimated them, who tried to define their worth according to narrow perspectives. Today is about showing them that they were right to believe in themselves and in us. Desiree nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind the bonuses. This wasn't just financial compensation, it was validation, recognition, a tangible acknowledgement that they belonged in spaces others had tried to exclude them from. The bank called to confirm the withdrawal, Desiree mentioned as they reached Imari's office. I've arranged for Phoenix to handle it personally. She's expecting you at 2. Phoenix Adebayo was a young associate at First Capital Bank, bright, detail-oriented, and refreshingly straightforward. She had handled several large transactions for Horizon in the past with admirable efficiency. Perfect, Imari said. I want to have everything ready to announce at the 4 o'clock meeting. What Imari didn't share with Desiree was the additional reason First Capital Bank had been chosen for this transaction. 6 months earlier, after a particularly frustrating experience trying to secure expansion financing, during which Imari had been asked if the real owner of the company would be joining the meeting, she had begun quietly purchasing shares in First Capital's parent company. It had taken months of strategic acquisitions through various investment vehicles, but Horizon Innovations now held a controlling interest in the very institution that had once made her wait in the lobby for an hour, while less qualified white entrepreneurs were ushered immediately into the loan officer's office. Most of the bank's employees, including branch managers like Clayton Whitfield, had no idea their institution was now effectively owned by a black woman who had once been told she didn't fit the profile of their high-net-worth clients. The morning passed in a flurry of meetings and preparations. Imari personally signed each bonus letter, adding handwritten notes acknowledging specific contributions from each team member. These weren't just employees. They were the foundation upon which Horizon had been built, and she made sure each note reflected that knowledge. At 1:30, Imari checked her appearance one last time before heading to the bank. The burgundy suit was her version of battle armor, chosen deliberately for days when she needed to project unquestionable authority. She'd learned early in her career that her appearance would be scrutinized in ways her male counterparts never experienced. Too feminine, and she wasn't taken seriously. Too severe, and she was labeled difficult or aggressive. The burgundy suit with its impeccable tailoring hit the impossible balance. Powerful but not threatening. Professional but still authentically her. The subtle African-inspired embroidery on the lapel, a nod to her heritage, was visible only up close, a private reminder of who she was and where she came from. "I'll be back by 3:30, she told her assistant as she gathered her belongings. The bank visit shouldn't take more than an hour. First Capital Bank's downtown branch occupied the first floor of a gleaming glass tower, ironically, just 12 floors below Horizon's own offices. The design was intentionally imposing. Soaring ceilings, marble surfaces, muted lighting that made everything look expensive and exclusive. It was architecture as intimidation, a physical manifestation of the message. You need to prove you belong here. Imari walked through the revolving door with the confidence of someone who knew, beyond any doubt, that she did belong, not just as a customer, but as an owner. She approached the reception desk and requested to see Phoenix Adebayo. "I'm sorry, Ms. Adebayo called in sick today," the receptionist informed her with a practiced smile. "But our branch manager, Mr. Whitfield, can assist you with any transaction." A flicker of annoyance crossed Imari's face, quickly controlled. The absence of Phoenix, who would have recognized her immediately, was an unfortunate complication, but not insurmountable. "That will be fine," she replied. "Please let him know Imari Washington is here regarding a previously arranged withdrawal." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at the name. Horizon Innovations was well known in the financial district, but she maintained her professional demeanor as she directed Imari to wait in one of the plush chairs in the reception area. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Around her, several other customers arrived, waited briefly, and were promptly assisted. Imari observed with growing irritation as two white men in business attire were immediately escorted to private offices, while she continued to wait. Finally, a thin man with a forced smile approached. "Mrs. Washington? I'm Clayton Whitfield, branch manager. I understand you wish to make a withdrawal today." His tone carried the faintest suggestion of doubt, as if her presence in this space required justification. It was a tone Imari had heard countless times throughout her career, at university, in boardrooms, at industry events. The unspoken question, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" "Yes," she replied, rising to her full height, 5'8" in heels, tall enough to meet his gaze directly. "I called ahead. $200,000. I have all the necessary identification." His eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, for a transaction of that magnitude, we'll need to take some extra precautions. If you'll follow me." And so began the scene that would culminate in Imari standing at the counter, being asked for the third time to verify her identity while the security guard watched her with unnecessary vigilance. As Clayton Whitfield examined her ID once again with exaggerated scrutiny, Imari felt a familiar heat rising within her. Not just anger at this specific indignity, but the accumulated weight of 1,000 similar moments stretching back to her childhood. She remembered her first banking experience at 14, accompanying her mother to cash a paycheck. The teller had counted the money twice before reluctantly handing it over, as if suspecting the hard-working hospital aide of some elaborate scheme. She remembered the mortgage officer who had lost their application paperwork 3 times when her parents were buying their first home. She remembered the financial aid officer who had suggested, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, that perhaps she had misunderstood the scholarship requirements at the prestigious university where she would eventually graduate summa cum laude. And now here she stood, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, effectively the owner of this very bank, being treated with the same suspicion and condescension. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her voice dropping to that quiet register that demanded attention, "this is the third time you've examined my identification. Is there a specific issue you're having trouble verifying?" Around them, other customers began to notice the tension unfolding at the counter. A young black woman behind the teller counter darted concerned glances in their direction. Imari recognized her as an employee who had started recently. Zara, if she remembered correctly from the personnel file she'd reviewed during the acquisition. "It's merely procedure for unusual transactions," Whitfield replied, his tone suggesting he was being extraordinarily patient. "Perhaps you'd like to speak with your financial advisor about alternative ways to access such large sums? A cashier's check might be more appropriate." The implication was clear. Women like you don't typically have legitimate reasons to withdraw this much cash. The security guard took another step closer. "My financial advisors work for me, Mr. Whitfield, not the other way around," Imari stated flatly. "And I don't recall asking for financial planning services today. I'm asking for access to my own money." For a moment, genuine confusion crossed Whitfield's face, as if the concept of a black woman directing financial professionals rather than deferring to them was difficult to process. "Of course," he said finally, his smile tightening. "But I still need additional verification for a cash withdrawal of this size. Perhaps a call to the account holder of record." Imari's eyebrow arched perfectly. "I'm the account holder of record, Mr. Whitfield." "Yes, but—" He paused, clearly searching for the right words. "For a business account of this nature, we typically confirm with the primary signatory." "I am the primary signatory," Imari said, each word precise and measured, "as well as the founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations, which holds this account." Whitfield's expression shifted subtly, recognition dawning, but accompanied by disbelief rather than respect. "Horizon Innovations? The tech company upstairs?" "The very same." Something in her tone must have finally penetrated his preconceptions because he straightened slightly, his manner becoming marginally more professional. "But the damage was done." "I see. Well, for security purposes, we'll still need additional confirmation. Company policy, you understand. Perhaps a second form of ID? And I'll need to call the number we have on file to verify the request." Imari reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the counter with deliberate slowness. "Feel free to call my office. And while you're at it, I'd like you to explain why the gentleman at the next counter was able to conduct his transaction with only a driver's license, while I've been subjected to this extraordinary level of scrutiny." Whitfield's face flushed. That's different. His transaction was routine. "Is it the amount that concerns you? Or is it me specifically?" Imari asked, her gaze unwavering. Whitfield cleared his throat uncomfortably at Imari's direct question. "It's not about you specifically, Mrs. Washington. It's bank protocol for unusual transactions." "Unusual?" Imari let the word hang in the air. "I see." The young teller, Zara, was now openly watching their exchange, her discomfort evident. She made brief eye contact with Imari, then quickly looked away, hands fidgeting nervously with the papers on her counter. "Perhaps," Imari said with deliberate patience, "you could call Phoenix Adebayo. She's handled my transactions before." "Ms. Adebayo called in sick today," Whitfield replied, a note of triumph in his voice, as if her absence somehow validated his suspicion. "As I said, I'm the manager on duty, and I'm simply following procedure." Imari took a measured breath, weighing her options. She could reveal her ownership of the bank immediately, watch the color drain from his face as realization dawned. It would be satisfying, certainly, but something held her back. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about Zara, watching nervously from behind her counter. This was about every person who had ever been questioned, doubted, or humiliated simply for existing in a space others felt they didn't belong in. "I'll tell you what," Mr. Whitfield, she said, her voice dropping to that quiet register that commanded attention. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to process my withdrawal. After that, I'll be making a call of my own. The implied threat registered, but Whitfield was too entrenched in his position to back down. His jaw tightened as he pushed her ID back toward her once more. Without additional verification, I simply can't authorize this. It's for your own protection, really. His tone suggested he was doing her a favor, protecting her from her own incomprehension of banking procedures. Imari had encountered this particular form of condescension many times throughout her career. The assumption that she couldn't possibly understand the complexities of whatever system she was navigating, despite her credentials, experience, and achievements. It was a uniquely frustrating form of discrimination because it masqueraded as helpfulness. She reached for her phone, maintaining eye contact with Whitfield as she dialed. Desiree? I'm at First Capital. Yes, there seems to be an irregularity with our withdrawal. Could you bring down the company documentation? And perhaps a copy of last month's acquisition report? Thank you. As she ended the call, Imari noticed something. A flicker of uncertainty crossing Whitfield's face. Good. Let him wonder what acquisition report might mean. My chief financial officer will be here shortly with additional documentation, she informed him calmly. In the meantime, perhaps you could explain why that gentleman, she nodded toward a white customer being assisted at another counter, was able to wire transfer $50,000 with just a driver's license, while my transaction requires this extraordinary level of verification? Whitfield's face flushed. That's completely different. Mr. Harrington is a longtime customer. I've banked here for 15 years, Imari countered. Yes, but Whitfield stopped himself, but the unspoken words hung in the air. He's different. He belongs here. You don't. He's what, Mr. Whitfield? Imari pressed, her gaze unwavering. The security guard had moved closer now, positioned just behind Imari's left shoulder, close enough that she could feel his presence without having to turn around. The message was clear. She was the threat that needed monitoring. The scene was drawing attention from other customers now. Some watched with open curiosity, others with discomfort. A few seemed to recognize Imari, whispering to each other as they glanced between her and Whitfield. Imari's mind flashed back to a moment 8 years earlier, standing in the lobby of a venture capital firm, portfolio in hand, preparing to pitch Horizon Innovations to a room of investors. The receptionist had assumed she was there to deliver food, despite her professional attire and the presentation materials she carried. Deliveries go through the back entrance, the woman had said without looking up. That day, Imari had swallowed her anger and calmly explained she had a meeting. Today, she would not swallow anything. Mr. Whitfield, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now quieter bank lobby. I think we both know what's happening here. But I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I will be leaving with my money today. The only question is whether you still have a job tomorrow. Before Whitfield could respond, the bank's doors swung open and Desiree strode in, carrying a sleek leather portfolio. At 45, Desiree Okafor commanded attention without effort, her 6-foot frame, impeccable gray suit, and confident stride marking her as someone used to navigating executive spaces with authority. Desiree took in the scene instantly. Imari at the counter, the hovering security guard, Whitfield's defensive posture, and her expression hardened. She had been Imari's right hand long enough to recognize these situations for exactly what they were. Mrs. Washington, she said, her Nigerian accent becoming slightly more pronounced, as it always did when she was angry. I have the documentation you requested. Whitfield straightened his tie, clearly reassessing the situation as Desiree approached. The dynamic had shifted. One black woman could be dismissed, but 2 accomplished black executives standing together commanded a different kind of attention. You must be the assistant? Whitfield attempted, extending his hand toward Desiree. Desiree ignored the offered hand. Chief Financial Officer of Horizon Innovations. And you are? Clayton Whitfield, Branch Manager. His voice had lost some of its earlier condescension. Excellent. Then you're exactly who we need to speak with. Desiree opened her portfolio, and began removing documents with precise, deliberate movements. Here is Mrs. Washington's corporate ID, her signature verification from your own bank records, and, she paused, placing a final document on the counter, a copy of Form SC-13D, filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission last month, detailing Horizon Innovations' acquisition of controlling interest in First Capital Bank's parent company. Have you ever experienced or witnessed profiling in a professional setting? Share your experience in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up so more people discover these important messages, and subscribe to support more stories like this if you haven't done so. Now let's get back to our story. The silence that followed was profound. Around them, the ambient noise of the bank seemed to fade as Whitfield stared at the documents, his expression cycling rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning horror of realization. "I don't," he began, then stopped, then tried again. "This isn't accurate." "I assure you it is," Imari said calmly. "Horizon Innovations now owns 53% of Fairmount Financial Group, which, as you know, is the parent company of First Capital Bank." She smiled thinly. "In a manner of speaking, Mr. Whitfield, I'm your boss." The security guard, who had been listening to the exchange, took a deliberate step back. Nearby customers murmured among themselves, some openly staring now, others pretending to focus on their own business while straining to hear. Zara, the young teller, had abandoned any pretense of working. Her eyes were wide as she watched the scene unfold, a mix of shock and something else, something like vindication, crossing her features. Whitfield's face had gone from red to ashen. "Mrs. Washington, if I had known, if you had known who I was, you would have treated me differently," Imari finished for him. "That's precisely the problem, isn't it? The issue isn't that you discriminated against me. The issue is that you would discriminate against anyone who looks like me but doesn't have the power to fight back." She leaned forward slightly, her voice low enough that only Whitfield, Desiree, and perhaps the still hovering security guard could hear. "How many other black customers have you humiliated, Mr. Whitfield? How many have you made feel unwelcome or unworthy of the same respect you automatically extend to customers like Mr. Harrington over there?" Whitfield swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "I assure you, I treat all our customers with the same level of—" "Don't," Imari cut him off sharply. "Don't compound your disrespect with lies. Not when we both know the truth." She straightened, gathering the documents Desiree had placed on the counter. "Now, I would like to complete my withdrawal. $200,000, as previously requested. Unless you'd like to find another reason to deny me access to my own money." Whitfield moved with new urgency, his earlier skepticism replaced by an almost frantic accommodation. "Of course, Mrs. Washington. Right away. I'll handle it personally." As he hurried toward the vault, Imari remained at the counter, maintaining her composure despite the hurricane of emotions beneath the surface. Beside her, Desiree stood in silent solidarity, her presence a familiar comfort in an all-too-familiar scenario. 8 years, Desiree murmured, so only Imari could hear. 8 years I've stood next to you in rooms where you were the smartest person present, watching people underestimate you. One would think it would get easier to witness. But it doesn't, Imari acknowledged quietly. "No, it doesn't." While they waited, Imari noticed Zara watching them from her station, her expression a complex mixture of admiration, uncertainty, and what looked like a desperate desire to communicate something. When their eyes met, Zara quickly looked away, but not before Imari caught the unmistakable sheen of unshed tears. Interesting. There was more happening at this branch than today's incident. Imari was certain of it now. Whitfield returned several minutes later, accompanied by another employee carrying a secure transaction bag. His demeanor had transformed completely, now all smiles and obsequious courtesy. "Mrs. Washington, we've prepared your withdrawal as requested. If you'll just sign here." He pushed a form across the counter, his hand trembling slightly. "And we can complete your transaction immediately." As Imari signed, Whitfield attempted to salvage the situation with nervous small talk. "Horizon Innovations, remarkable company. Your security software is truly revolutionary. I had no idea you were the founder. Such a pleasure to have you banking with us. If there's ever anything else we can do. Mr. Whitfield, Imari interrupted his rambling. I'd like to speak with you privately after we complete this transaction. Is your office available? The false smile faltered. Of course. Yes. Right this way. Whitfield led them through the bank toward his office, painfully aware of the stairs following their progress. Imari noticed how staff members watched their manager with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed satisfaction. Again, interesting. His office was exactly what Imari expected, meticulously organized, decorated with bland corporate art, and a few framed certificates. A large desk dominated the space, positioned so that visitors would have to sit in lower chairs across from him. A subtle power play that Imari had seen countless times in corporate America. Whitfield gestured toward the chairs. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Again, Mrs. Washington, I want to express my sincere apologies for any misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Imari stated flatly, remaining standing. It was discrimination. Let's be clear about that. Whitfield's mouth opened, then closed. No denial came. How long have you been manager of this branch, Mr. Whitfield? Imari asked. 7 years this October, he replied, his voice strained. And in those 7 years, how would you characterize your treatment of black customers compared to white customers? Be honest. This conversation isn't being recorded, but I assure you, your answer matters. Whitfield tugged at his collar, visibly uncomfortable. I treat everyone according to bank protocols. That wasn't my question, Imari pressed. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Whitfield sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. I suppose I may have been more vigilant with certain customers. For security purposes. Certain customers, Imari repeated. And how do you determine which customers require this extra vigilance? When no answer came, Desiree stepped forward. We've reviewed customer satisfaction scores for this branch, Mr. Whitfield. Did you know there's a statistically significant disparity in how customers rate their experiences here? White customers consistently report high satisfaction. Black and brown customers report feeling scrutinized, questioned, and unwelcome. That's subjective, Whitfield protested weakly. Numbers don't lie, Desiree countered. And neither do patterns. Imari moved around the desk, effectively taking Whitfield's position of authority in the room. It was a deliberate move, one that made him shift uncomfortably in response. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Whitfield, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As of this moment, your employment with First Capital Bank is terminated. The color drained from his face. You can't. I can't, and I have. As controlling shareholder of the parent company, I have broad authority over personnel decisions, particularly in cases involving discrimination. The board will support this decision once they review the customer satisfaction data Ms. Okafor mentioned, along with the security footage of our interaction today. Whitfield slumped into a chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. This is my career we're talking about. Over one misunderstanding. No, Mr. Whitfield. This is about a pattern of behavior that has likely affected hundreds of customers over 7 years. This is about systems that allow that behavior to continue unchecked. This is about accountability. Imari reached into her purse and removed a business card, placing it precisely on the desk. Our HR department will contact you regarding severance terms, which will be fair despite the circumstances. I suggest you use the time to reflect on how you arrived at this moment. She turned toward the door, then paused, looking back at the now former branch manager. One last thing, Mr. Whitfield. Before you leave today, I want you to personally apologize to every black employee in this branch for the environment you've created. They've watched you treat customers who look like them with suspicion and disrespect. They deserve to hear you acknowledge that harm. Whitfield's face flushed with humiliation. That's unnecessary. And frankly, inappropriate. Is it? Imari raised an eyebrow. More inappropriate than calling security on a customer attempting to access her own funds? More inappropriate than creating a workplace where employees like Zara are afraid to speak up when they witness discrimination. The mention of Zara's name caused a visible reaction. Guilt, perhaps. or surprised that Imari had noticed the young teller's distress. "You have 1 hour to clear out your desk and make those apologies," Imari concluded. "A security officer will escort you out afterward. Desiree will oversee the transition until an interim manager is appointed." With that, she walked out of the office, Desiree following close behind. As they moved through the bank toward the main floor, Imari maintained her composed exterior despite the emotional turbulence within. This wasn't how she had planned to spend her afternoon. She had intended to simply withdraw the money for employee bonuses and return to the office to prepare for the celebration. Instead, she had been drawn into yet another battle against the casual discrimination that she and countless others faced daily. She was tired, bone-deep tired, and yet she could not, stop fighting these battles when they presented themselves. Not when she had the power to create consequences where so often there were none. "Are you all right?" Desiree asked quietly as they reached the main floor of the bank. Imari nodded slightly. "I will be. But before we leave, there's something I need to do." She walked toward the teller counter where Zara was helping a customer, consciously dialing back the intensity of her presence so as not to intimidate the young woman. When the customer left, Imari approached. "Zara, isn't it?" she asked gently. The young teller looked up, surprise and nervousness flashing across her face. "Yes, ma'am. Zara Thompson. I'm Imari Washington." She offered her hand across the counter. "I know who you are," Zara replied, accepting the handshake with slight trepidation. "Everyone knows after what just happened." "I noticed your reaction earlier," Imari said, keeping her voice low enough for privacy. "This wasn't the first time you've seen Mr. Whitfield treat someone that way, was it?" Zara hesitated, years of workplace conditioning warring with the opportunity to finally speak truth. "No," she finally admitted. "It wasn't. Would you be willing to talk about that?" "Not here, perhaps in one of the meeting rooms." Zara glanced around nervously. "I'm supposed to stay at my station." "I think under the circumstances, an exception can be made," Imari assured her. "This is important, Zara. Your experiences matter." The genuine concern in Imari's voice seemed to reach something in the young woman. She nodded once, decisively, and motioned to another teller to cover her station before leading Imari and Desiree to a small conference room off the main floor. Once the door closed behind them, Zara's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing the weight she had been carrying. "It's been happening since I started here," she began, the words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. "Mr. Whitfield has different rules for different customers. Black customers always need extra ID. Hispanic customers get the Spanish-speaking teller even when they're speaking perfect English. Middle Eastern customers get extra questions about the source of their funds." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. 3 weeks ago, an elderly black woman, a retired teacher who's banked here for decades, came in to withdraw $4,000 for her grandson's tuition payment. Mr. Whitfield made her wait 2 hours for verification. She missed the payment deadline and the boy lost his spot in the program. Imari felt a familiar heat rising within her, the same controlled rage that had fueled her throughout the confrontation with Whitfield. "Did anyone report these incidents?" Desiree asked, already knowing the answer. Zara's bitter laugh confirmed it. "To whom?" "Mr. Whitfield was the manager. He handled all complaints. And anyone who pushed back too hard found themselves with poor performance reviews or difficult schedules. So he created a system where he couldn't be held accountable," Imari summarized. "Exactly." Zara's shoulders slumped slightly. "I've only been here 8 months. I needed this job. My mother's medical bills." She trailed off, then straightened, finding resolve. "But I hated being part of it. Watching it happen day after day and feeling powerless to stop it." Imari studied the young woman, her intelligence, her integrity, her courage in speaking out now when given the chance. In that moment, a seed of an idea began to form. "Zara," Imari said, making a decision, "how would you feel about helping to change this bank from the inside out?" The young woman's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "This branch needs new leadership, someone who understands firsthand the damage that discrimination causes, And who has the integrity to ensure it doesn't continue? Imari glanced at Desiree, who nodded in silent agreement, already following her thinking. We need an interim assistant manager while we search for a permanent branch manager. Someone who can help us identify and address the cultural problems Mr. Whitfield created. Understanding dawned on Zara's face, followed immediately by doubt. Me? But I'm just a teller. I don't have management experience. You have something more valuable, Imari countered. You have moral clarity and first-hand knowledge of what needs to change. The technical aspects of management can be learned. Character and integrity are innate. Desiree added, we would pair you with a mentor from our corporate banking team. You wouldn't be alone in this. Zara seemed genuinely stunned by the offer. I don't know what to say. You don't need to decide immediately, Imari assured her. Think about it. Talk it over with your family. But know that I see something in you. The same fire I recognize in myself and in others who refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. A tentative hope flickered across Zara's features, the expression of someone daring to imagine a future different from the one they'd resigned themselves to. Thank you, Mrs. Washington. I will think about it. Good. Imari replied with a genuine smile. Whatever you decide, things are going to change here. I promise you that. As they left the conference room, Imari and Desiree could see Whitfield in his office, packing his personal items under the watchful eye of the same security guard who had earlier been positioned to intimidate Imari. The irony wasn't lost on either woman. A senior teller had been temporarily placed in charge of the branch operations, and Imari stopped briefly to explain that corporate would be sending someone to oversee the transition. The woman's obvious relief spoke volumes about Whitfield's leadership. We still need to get the cash for the bonuses, Desiree reminded Imari as they prepared to leave. The announcement is in less than 2 hours. Right. Imari nodded, momentarily distracted by the unexpected turn of events. They returned to the counter where another teller, an older white woman with a kind face, now stood ready to assist them. Mrs. Washington, we have your withdrawal prepared, the teller informed her, a new deference in her tone that hadn't been there when Imari first entered the bank. Word traveled fast. If you'll just verify the amount and sign here. As Imari signed for the withdrawal, she was acutely aware of how differently she was being treated now, not because her identity had changed, but because her power had been revealed. It was a familiar pattern. The world treated you according to their perception of your power, not your inherent worth as a human being. For most Black customers who encountered discrimination, there was no dramatic revelation of ownership to force respect, no ability to fire those who mistreated them. They simply endured, absorbed the indignity, and moved on, 1,000 tiny cuts that never fully healed. With the transaction completed and the cash secured in a bank pouch, Imari and Desiree finally left First Capital Bank. As they stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight, Imari exhaled slowly, releasing some of the tension she'd been carrying. That was not how I planned to spend my afternoon, she said with grim humor. No, Desiree agreed, but it was necessary. And not just for you. They walked in companionable silence toward the elevator that would take them back up to Horizon's offices. Inside the elevator, away from public eyes, Imari finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like, she said quietly, to simply exist without having to fight these battles. To walk into a bank and be treated with basic human dignity without having to prove I deserve it. Desiree squeezed her friend's shoulder gently. One day, that's what we're working toward, isn't it? A world where our children won't have to fight these same fights. One day, Imari echoed, straightening as the elevator doors opened onto Horizon's reception area. The moment of vulnerability passed, replaced once more by the composed CEO that the world expected to see. Their executive assistant, Terrence, approached immediately. Everything okay? You were gone longer than expected. We had an educational detour, Desiree replied diplomatically. Imari checked her watch. Is everything ready for the announcement? Yes, the team is gathering in the main conference room as we speak. They know something's happening, but we've kept the details under wraps as you requested. Imari smiled, her first genuine smile since entering the bank earlier. Perfect. This is going to be a moment they remember for the rest of their careers. 30 minutes later, Imari stood at the head of Horizon's largest conference room, surveying the faces of the 27 people who had been with the company from its earliest days. These were the true believers, the ones who had accepted lower salaries in the lean years, who had worked impossible hours to meet deadlines, who had trusted her vision when others dismissed it. 7 years ago, she began, her voice carrying easily through the hushed room. Many of you sat with me in a much smaller conference room. Actually, it was more of a storage closet we'd converted, and I made you a promise. I said that if you believed in Horizon enough to stay when we could barely make payroll, I would ensure your loyalty was rewarded when we succeeded. She paused, looking at individual faces. Malik from engineering, whose coding brilliance had been the backbone of their first product. Sophia from legal, who had negotiated contracts with companies 10 times their size and somehow always got favorable terms. Jackson from sales, who could convince skeptical clients to take a chance on an unproven startup. Today, with the finalization of the GlobeTech contract, Horizon Innovations has officially moved beyond success into something more. We haven't just secured our future. We've redefined what's possible for a company started by a black woman from the south side of Chicago with nothing but an idea and a refusal to be told no. A ripple of appreciative chuckles moved through the room. They'd all heard the story of how Imari had been rejected by 17 venture capital firms before finding a believer in her 18th pitch. That success belongs to all of you, she continued. And today, I'm fulfilling the promise I made in that storage closet office. She nodded to Desiree, who began distributing envelopes to each person in the room. Inside each envelope is a bonus check reflecting both your years with the company and your individual contributions to our growth. But more importantly, there's also a document granting you equity in Horizon Innovations, making each of you an owner of the company you helped build. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs as people opened their envelopes. Tears welled in several eyes as they registered the amounts. Bonuses equivalent to half their annual salaries, in many cases, along with significant equity stakes. This isn't charity or generosity, Imari emphasized, her voice cutting through the emotional reactions. This is earned. This is deserved. This is your due for believing in this company, and in me, when it wasn't easy to do so. As the team members absorbed the magnitude of what they'd received, Imari couldn't help but think of the contrast between this moment and the one at the bank earlier. Here, in the company she'd built, people were valued for their contributions, their character, their commitment, not judged by their appearance or background. It wasn't a perfect world, certainly. The very existence of First Capital Bank's discriminatory culture proved that. But here, in this space, they had created something different, something better. The celebration continued, with team members approaching Imari one by one to express gratitude, share memories, or simply embrace. Through it all, she maintained her composed demeanor, though her genuine joy was evident to those who knew her well. Later that evening, as the office slowly emptied and the excitement of the day began to fade, Imari sat alone in her office, gazing out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. Her phone buzzed with a text from Desiree. Just got word from HR. Zara Thompson accepted the assistant manager position. Training starts Monday. Imari smiled, feeling a sense of completion. The day had begun with the intention of rewarding those who had stood by her, and it was ending with an opportunity to help another young black woman begin her own journey toward leadership. There was a symmetry to it that felt right. Her office phone rang, the private line that only family could reach. "You're working late." Khalil's warm voice came through the speaker. "Just finishing up," she replied, her tone softening as it always did when speaking to her husband. "How did Amara's academic decathlon practice go?" "She's a force of nature, just like her mother," Khalil chuckled. The team voted her captain unanimously. Pride swelled in Amari's chest. "That's my girl. How was your day? Did the bonus announcements go well?" Imari considered how to answer. Should she tell him about the confrontation at the bank? The all-too-familiar humiliation of being questioned, doubted, watched with suspicion? Or should she focus on the triumph? How she'd turned an act of discrimination into an opportunity for systemic change. It was eventful, she said finally. I'll tell you everything when I get home. But yes, the bonuses went very well. You should have seen their faces, Khalil. For some of them, it's life-changing money. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Not just for the success, but for remembering your promise to them. For bringing others along as you climbed. It's the only way the climb means anything, she replied, echoing words her grandmother had spoken to her decades ago. After ending the call, Imari gathered her belongings and prepared to leave for the day. As she moved through the now-quiet office, she paused at the wall displaying Horizon's mission statement, words she had written in that storage closet office 7 years earlier. To create technology that opens doors for those who have been shut out. To build a company where merit matters more than pedigree. To prove that the most powerful innovation comes from diverse minds working toward a common purpose. 6 months later, Imari stood at a podium in First Capital Bank's downtown branch, now transformed in both appearance and culture. Gone were the intimidating design elements that had once made the space feel exclusive and unwelcoming. The lobby had been redesigned with warmer colors, more accessible seating areas, and artwork by local artists from diverse backgrounds. More importantly, the staff reflected a new commitment to inclusion. Under new leadership, a Black woman with 20 years of banking experience who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion at her previous institution. The branch had implemented new training protocols, community outreach programs, and accountability metrics to ensure all customers received equitable treatment. Today marks the official launch of First Capital's Community Investment Initiative, Imari announced to the assembled crowd of employees, customers, and media representatives. This program will provide low-interest loans and financial education to entrepreneurs from historically underserved communities across the city. She scanned the audience, noting with satisfaction the diversity of faces looking back at her. Banking has traditionally been an industry of barriers that have kept too many brilliant minds and innovative ideas from reaching their full potential. Today, we begin dismantling those barriers, one relationship at a time. Near the front of the audience sat Zara Thompson, now assistant branch manager, her confidence having grown visibly over the past 6 months. Beside her was Phoenix Adebayo, back from medical leave and now heading up the new community outreach department. None of this would be possible without the dedication of our team members, Imari continued, gesturing toward the bank employees, particularly those who had the courage to speak up when they witnessed injustice, and who now lead our efforts to create a more equitable banking experience. As the ceremony concluded and attendees mingled during the reception, Imari found herself approached by an elderly Black woman whom she recognized from Zara's description months earlier. The retired teacher whose grandson had lost his spot in an educational program due to Whitfield's discriminatory delays. Mrs. Washington, the woman said, extending her hand. I'm Doris Johnson. I wanted to thank you personally for the changes you've made here. After 63 years of banking, this is the first time I've felt truly respected when I walked through those doors. Imari clasped the woman's hand warmly. Thank you for sharing that with me, Mrs. Johnson. May I ask, your grandson? Was he able to find another educational opportunity? A proud smile lit up the older woman's face. He was indeed. Thanks to Miss Thompson over there. When she became assistant manager, she helped us apply for one of your company's technology scholarships. He's studying computer science now at the community college and doing quite well. The information surprised and touched Imari. She hadn't known that Zara had taken such initiative. It was the kind of leadership that couldn't be taught, the instinct to not just acknowledge past wrongs, but to actively work to right them. As the event wound down, Imari found a quiet moment with Zara. I heard about the scholarship for Mrs. Johnson's grandson, she said. That was excellent thinking. Zara smiled, a hint of her former shyness still present, but now balanced with evident confidence. I remembered what you said that day, about changing things from the inside out. It's not enough to stop doing harm. We have to actively create good to counter the damage that's already been done. Imari nodded, recognizing her own philosophy reflected back at her. How are you finding management so far? Challenging, Zara admitted with refreshing candor, but in the best possible way. Every day, I learn something new. And every day, I see the difference it makes when customers walk in and are treated with respect from the moment they enter. The numbers reflect it, Imari noted. Customer satisfaction scores have risen across all demographic groups. New accounts are up 30%, with the largest growth among Black and Hispanic customers. It turns out treating people with dignity is good business, Zara replied with a hint of irony. Indeed, Imari agreed, though it's a lesson many institutions still struggle to learn. Later, as she drove home, Imari reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The confrontation at the bank that day had been both painfully familiar and uniquely empowering. For once, she had been in a position not just to endure discrimination, but to create consequences for it, and more importantly, to implement systemic changes that would prevent others from experiencing similar treatment. It was a privilege not available to most who faced such discrimination. Imari understood that her wealth and position gave her power that others lacked, which was precisely why she felt obligated to use that power to create ripples of change wherever possible. As she pulled into her driveway, she saw Amara through the window, surrounded by textbooks at the kitchen table, preparing for the National Academic Decathlon Championships that would take place the following weekend. Her daughter looked up, spotted her mother's car, and waved enthusiastically. Imari waved back, a sense of profound gratitude washing over her. This was why all the battles were worth fighting, so that Amara might face fewer of them, so that her daughter's generation might know more open doors than closed ones, so that perhaps, one day, the color of one's skin would truly matter less than the content of one's character. It was a journey without end, this long walk toward justice and equity. But today, Imari had helped take another step forward. And tomorrow, she would take another, and another, for as long as it took. What did you think about Imari's approach? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story impacted you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to support more stories that highlight both injustice and triumph in our community.